Okay, we're good to go. So if you'll introduce yourself a little bit to these students, and then they've got questions for you.
Okay. Good morning, boys and girls and teachers. I am Michael Shoulders. I am.
Hello. Hi. Hey.
I am a retired educator, and now I'm a full-time author. And my job is to get kids out of class so they don't have to do classwork. That's my job. Most people think that an author writes books, but really our job is to get people out of class. That's a joke, but I will tell you that I used to be a teacher. I was a principal for a while. And now I simply write books and I travel speaking around the world. In 3 weeks, I will fly to Germany and I will visit for 7 days to schools in Germany and talk about what I do. And so today I'm talking with boys and girls in Tuscaloosa, Alabama about my books. So I'm glad to take some of your questions and let's see what we can learn about writing books. Hi there.
Hey. How long does it take you to figure out what you want to write about?
It takes me a very, very long time to figure out what I want to write about. And the truth of the matter is, and I believe it's for most writers, is when you sit down, you don't necessarily know what you're going to write about. So my best advice that I give to young writers is to go ahead and sit down and just start writing. And here's why. What you put down on your paper the first time will probably not be seen ever by anyone but you. Real writing is rewriting. That's the art of writing a book. This book here, when I sold it to my editor, she asked me 4,000 questions about it. Who is this person? Why is she important? Because I didn't get that in the story. Who is he? Why would they be here? So when I sit down to write, I don't always know what I'm going to write about. I just sit down. I start writing with my notes. I'm kind of jumping ahead because I haven't told you about the research I do. I bet someone's going to ask me about that in a little while. And so very often, you're going to write 20 versions of the book, maybe even more, probably even more. And so that's a fair question. I appreciate that question. That's a fair question. How do you know what to write about? You don't always know. I will tell you this. When I wrote Crossing the Deadline, much of this book, Crossing the Deadline, takes place in a town called Cahaba. Now, Cahaba was the first capital of Alabama. Did you know that? No. This was the first capital. It was called Cahaba. But Cahaba had a big problem. It's right by the river, and it flooded all the time. And in this map of the town, you can kind of see the river up at the top part. So the town does not even exist today. And Ms. Ramsey, I'm sorry to say this, but the lawnmower people are here, so the dog may start barking. I apologize. I'll try to mute it if I'm listening on your end. But anyway, so I don't always know. I don't always know. But if I've done a lot of research, I have a good place to start. I have a good place to start with my story. At least that, I have a beginning, and then I can change it later on. Thank you. Good question. Nice start. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
What's your question?
How many rough drafts do you have to type before you know it's right?
How many what do I have to type?
Rough drafts.
Oh. This many. So here's what I call a rough draft, actually. I call a rough draft like the first very early version of my book. And I kind of think about a rough draft being like the very first time I start writing something and getting it down. And as I told the last group, I know that most of that's going to change. So I love the word revision because the word revision has the prefix re, which means to do again, and vision, which means to look at something. And that's what you're doing with revision. You're looking at it again. Vision again, vision again. I have multiple copies of my books when I'm done. And it's scary. It's scary to you as a sixth grader. Are you in sixth grade? Okay, that sounds scary. But if you're going to be a writer, you know that's how you play the game. A basketball player isn't angry that they're not allowed to step out of bounds. That's part of the game. And you enjoy the game because you know the rules. In writing, real writing is revision. And every time I rewrite something, I probably make it better. Sometimes, ladies, I make it worse. And when I discover that, it's not funny. Stop laughing. When I make it worse, I'll go back and change it back to where it was, which is another point that's kind of interesting that you need to know. I don't throw out anything. So if I make something worse, something I don't like as much, I have my earlier version that I can go back to. And so how many versions of the book? Lots. But every time I look at it, I make it better. Good question, ladies.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi, hello.
Real loud. Real loud.
Sorry. What inspired you to be a historical text author?
Okay. When I was a teacher, I read every day to my students out loud. When I taught fifth grade, I had to teach Civil War in fifth grade. So I read out loud. My reading aloud time was spent with a book about the Civil War called Across 5 Aprils. It won the Newbery Award for the most distinguished book of the year. So what inspired me to write this book, Crossing the Deadline, my editor actually called me and she said, do you know about a ship that sank in Tennessee, exploded, and more people died than the Titanic? And I thought she was crazy. I said, what? And she said, yeah, it's true. So what actually inspired me to write that book is an idea from my editor, who thought that I could write a book, a novel, a historical novel on the Sultana. Number one, I love books. Number two, I love learning. And number three, the idea came from her. So inspiration to me, when people say, what inspired you to write a book? I can look at that as meaning, where did you get the idea? What gave you the inspiration? Or I also see the word as what inspired you to mean what motivates you to do that. So I have a love of books, number one, and story. And but the idea for this book actually came from my editor. It was not my idea. I have 19 picture books and I have one novel. And so that idea came from her. I hope that answered your question. Uh-huh. Hi there.
What is the phrase that you study history?
It garbled. I did not hear it.
What is the true reason you study history?
Ms. Ramsey, you're going to have to repeat it. I can't understand.
What is the true reason we study history?
I heard the word, what is the something research?
What is the true reason we study history?
I don't know. Do you?
Yes, you do.
That sounds like there's a definite answer. What is the real reason we study history? Well, I'll tell you what they say. If we don't know history, we are doomed to repeat it. I think studying history gives us a sense of who we are, where we came from, who our people are. How do we go about making life better for those who are living today than in the past? History is very important to get a sense of culture, of people, and understanding about the little bit of time we spend on this earth. I don't want to get too preachy with you because it's not my job. I'm a writer, but you asked the question. So I'm going to tell you what I think. I think our jobs on earth are to help each other experience a good time while we're here. And I think we get to that by looking at history. What have people done before us? What mistakes have they made? How do we go about making life better? So I don't think I answered your question at all, but you've given me something to think about. So you have a good day. Miss Ramsey, I don't want hard questions.
Yes.
No. I want easy questions.
I can tell you these kids are really deep thinkers. These came from them.
All right. Hi there.
Are some of your books based off your experiences in real life?
I think your microphone is not near where they're sitting for some reason, because I just cannot hear them.
Yeah.
Are some of your books based off your experience in real life?
No. No. I have 2 fiction picture books, and the rest of my picture books are nonfiction. And then I have this one, and this is based in the Civil War. That boy, the character that is typified on the cover, was a real person that I found who was on the Sultana, which was the ship that exploded. Do you all know, shake your head yes or no, do you know about the ship that this book is about, that this ship is featured in this book? All right, let me give you a brief history. The worst ship disaster in America had men who had just left Alabama, had left a prison in Alabama. And 1,800 lives will be lost at Memphis, Tennessee when a ship explodes. And so this book is based on a boy who was 15 on this ship, but he was 13 when he got into the Civil War. And he was from Indianapolis. He was from Indiana, Centerville, Indiana. And so this book is certainly not based on anything in my life. And none of my books are. None of my books are. That's the short answer. Sorry.
Thank you.
Have you all ever spoken to an author before? No. No? Well, I've never spoken to a child before.
What constantly inspires you to be an author? Because we know that writing can be difficult and sometimes tiring. So what is it about writing that makes you want to write?
I love that question. Here's what you need to keep in mind if you're going to be a writer. Number one, it's usually a lonely job. you do it alone. So I'll go to Starbucks and I'll spend about 4 hours at Starbucks. Somebody's got to do it. And I'll sit there, and I usually have my earphones on so people don't bother me. They know I can't hear them, and just leave me alone. Thank you. Go about your business. And I'm not a shy person. So in that regard, it seems like it's not a very good fit. But I love books so much. I especially like historical fiction. So that's why I was glad to write Crossing the Deadline. But here's what inspired me to be an author in the first place, and I swear this is true. I was like Mrs. Ramsey. I was a teacher. I was also a principal. And I went to a class for educators to teach us how to teach you how to write and be better writers. And I was never going to publish a book, ever. It was not on my radar. It was not in my universe. It was nowhere near what I was going to do. And one of the authors that we heard, it was a 2-week class. We stayed all night in this town for like 14 nights. And we heard authors speak. And one of them got in front of us and said, do not try to write a book. It's too hard. That is what inspired me to try to write my first book. I could not believe that as a teacher, as a principal, as an educator, my job was to look at boys and girls just like you and look at you and say, yes, you can. You can become a dentist. You can become a baker, a chef, a teacher. Yes, you can. And here was someone looking at us saying, you can't do this. It's too hard. That made me mad. And I know that's not the best reason to be a writer, but it is actually number one on my list. Number two is how much I love books. You've got to love books, but I already loved books. I loved books for 45 years before that. You understand what I'm saying? But when someone looked at our audience that I was in and said, don't try it, I decided to try it. And it took me 5 years to sell my first book. 5 years, that's a long time. That's almost how long you've been in school. But I didn't quit trying because yes, you can. If you want something bad enough, you have to go out, you have to go to class, you have to listen, you have to pay attention, you have to practice. You can be an illustrator. You can be a veterinarian if you're willing to do the work. You have it up here. Everybody in that classroom has it up here to become what you want to become. Do you have it here? Do you have the heart? Are you going to do the homework? Are you going to show up to class? So what inspired me to be a writer is my love of books and then the challenge that somebody gave. And it's really that simple. And I worked hard until it happened. And now I have 20 books with my name on it. Rock Larry Baseball. Hey, girl. There you are.
Is it hard to find people who are willing to let you interview them to make a book?
No. Everybody loves to be interviewed and ask their opinion. Of course, what I write about isn't controversial. If I were writing a political book, or if I were writing a book about religion, someone might not want to say something to me. But no, that's a great question because part of what I do is I interview people for my books. I don't have it here with me. The last smokestack on the Titanic, most people don't know this. The very last smokestack on the Titanic was 100% fake. It wasn't even a smokestack. It just looked like one. So by interviewing people and talking to them, you can learn a lot of information. Here's one of the best. Ms. Ramsey, I hope you'll write this down maybe and share it later. This is one of the best quotes that I've heard this year. I just heard this year. Everybody on earth knows stuff you don't know. It doesn't matter where they live, what country they're from. Are they rich? Are they poor? Everybody knows stuff you don't know. And we can all learn from each other. And I think that's powerful. I think that's powerful. I do interview people. I read books. For instance, the Bugler on this cover, that's the army group he was with. I read this book. It's only about his army group and where he was. This is a book written by people who used to live in the first capital of Alabama, Cahaba. I read it just to see what they thought about their community, their town. See that church? Let me show you something weird I learned. I'm going to share my screen with you. This is very unusual. The first capital of Alabama was called Cahaba. And as I was doing my research, I found where Cahaba was. It's right outside. Here's Selma up here. So it's right down here where the Cahaba River joins the Alabama River. It was a very nice town. That is called the Kirkpatrick House. But what happened is the town flooded. The prison that boy ends up in was in that town. Here's a diagram of the Cahaba prison right by the Alabama River. Well, there's a book called Lost of the Sultana, and there's a picture of the ship that boy is going to be on. So I learned a lot from that book. This guy from Kentucky said that when he left on March the 20th, the river overflowed the banks and actually flowed into the prison about 2 feet all over the prison. And the prison commander would not let them out of the prison. So they sat in the river water for about 10 days. So here's a map of the town. This is a real map off of Google Maps. That is a real map. And here's what the town looks like today. In the satellite picture, you can see the Alabama River, and it's labeled Majors Creek off to the right. And there's the Cahaba River joining it. That is the first capital of Alabama. And there is nothing there today because it flooded so often. The whole town ended up evaporating, drying up. So let me stop my screen share. So yes, I will interview people and talk with them for my book. Lots of people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great question.
All right, this is going to need to be our last question because it's class change and the students are getting ready to go to either PE or their elective.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, go ahead.
When you are creating the characters, do you point out the description of them before you summarize it, or you describe them as you go?
Repeat it real fast, real loud.
When you create characters, do you point out the description of them before you begin writing, or do you describe them as you write?
Yeah, I'm going to be very honest with you about my characters. I do something really weird. Is I will go. I'm not even going to tell you where. I shouldn't tell you where. I go to a weird place that has lots of pictures of people. It's lots of people, pictures of people, and I'll take a screenshot, like the gentleman right there in the middle. I might take just a picture on the computer of his. Yeah, smile, because you're going to be in a book. So I'll take his picture, right? And then what I'll do is I'll drop that into a folder about my character. And until I learn who he is, I'll call him Billy Bob. until I learn who Billy Bob is. I'll write down some stuff about him. What does he like? What makes him angry? I may never use it, but I want to know who he is. So I go to this weird place. I'll tell your teacher later, and then if she wants to share it with you, she can share it with you. But it's a weird place. And there were a lot of men in this book. And so, yes, I knew what every person looked like in my head. And so, and I knew things about them. And so I will do like a character sketch about them. Are they easy to get angry? Are they easy to anger? Do they like Jell-O? You never know the weirdest little something that might intrigue your reader. And so I'll just jot down, and I'll develop a character sketch with all of my characters, most of them. How tall are they? Are they chubby? By the way, let me show you this one more thing. I hope you have time. The governor of Indiana is in my book. I found a real picture of him. That's Governor Oliver Hazard Perry Morton. He was the governor of Indiana, and he was from the town of Centerville, Indiana. And the character in my book was from that town. I took that picture. I drove to his town. Now, the reason there's a hole in that building is this town was had the first super highway come through it. So they took the people's yards out. They took their porches. And in order for them to bring their buggies to their houses and their horses, most of the houses in that town have a hole in it. And the people would pull through their house into their backyards. And so I thought that was interesting, and that's mentioned in my book. And there's another building that is very important in my story. And here's the governor. So often I'll have if I'm doing like in my book, let me see. Okay. So if I'm writing about a real person, I probably will have their picture. But if I don't, I'll make up a picture. I know what they look like. And I don't just envision in my head. I grab somebody off the internet, and it might be that guy sitting right back there in the middle of this, right back there, that dude. Yes. Thank you. They all left, didn't they?
Oh no, they're still here. In fact, I think there's something that they want to tell you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you. We really appreciate you taking time to speak with us. I know the last group was really inspired by our first talk, so I'm sure these kids are too. And you and I will be in touch soon, and I'll be happy to send you a link to the live broadcast if you'd like to see it.
Yes, please do. I've already watched the other one.
All right, wonderful. All right, have a wonderful day.
Bye. Ciao. I got work to do. Bye.